Hey guys, in today's video I want to talk about recreational tennis players' limitations when it comes to technique. See, the intuitive tennis methodology is based on how the best players in the history of the game perform their strokes. What I've been able to establish with a tremendous amount of research are fundamental elements of their technique that all high-level players have in common. And it's exactly those fundamentals that I teach to the recreational level. So you're probably thinking, Nick, if I learn your methodology, intuitive tennis, will I play like the pros? And not in the slightest. Once you learn my methodology, your game is going to look nothing like the pro game. Now, there are several reasons why you're not going to look like the pros. Number one, the pros are professional athletes. And to understand what a professional athlete is, it is someone who performs at the maximum possible level. There's absolutely no way to play better tennis than the pros do. So they go to the limit when it comes to athleticism. That is the only way you can get to that level. So obviously, if you're a recreational player, if you never play professionally, you're not gonna have that same athletic capability. You didn't start playing tennis at a young age. You didn't put in the innumerable amount of hours training and honing your craft. So of course, your athleticism is going to be nothing like the athleticism that you see on tour. But that's not all, guys. Another reason why your game will look nothing like the pros, because you have your own genetics, you have your own body. And no matter how hard you try to copy a professional stroke, for example, a lot of people try to copy the Federer forehand. I've yet to see someone actually look like Federer when they copy their forehand. Why is that the case? Because you have your own genetics. Your body is going to move in a different way compared to that particular player that you're trying to copy. So for that reason, every player has their own genetics and every player should develop their own style. And thirdly, and most importantly, the reason why you're not going to look like the pros, and that is the topic of today's video, are your limitations. And these are going to be physical limitations that everybody has. Some have more limitations than others. And I'm going to go through a few strokes and explain what those limitations are. So let's start with the serve. So what I teach is an optimal loading position where the body is bent in a reverse C. If you're interested to know in great detail what that is, you can check my serve lesson with Shamir where I talk about this loading position. But I'll give you a brief overview over what it is. So basically, it's a bending of the body that occurs where the chest is pointing to the sky. And I'm bent this way also to make this a more of a efficient setup. You also want to stick your hips slightly into the court. Now, there's going to be a lot of players who simply cannot bend backwards. They're stiff in their back. Maybe they have a neck issue. Personally, I can't bend backwards anymore either. I'm 44, about to turn 45, and my flexibility and range of motion has decreased drastically. So what I tell to all my students is not to go past the comfort zone. So you want to attempt to, for example, bend backwards as much as you can, but as soon as it feels stiff, as soon as it feels uncomfortable, that is your limitation. That's where you know where to stop. So it is perfectly okay if you can't bend backwards at all to have a setup more like the WA, which is basically a J setup where you bend your knees, but you keep your upper body more straight. Now I want to give you one limitation per stroke because otherwise this video could go on for over an hour. So we covered one limitation on the serve. But let me show you one common limitation on the forehand. That is the actual finish. And this is something that I suffer from as well. But a lot of recreational players won't be able to finish the stroke very fast. They get to somewhere around here and then the arm just simply stops. Whether it's a stiff shoulder, whatever it may be, they're just very uncomfortable finishing all the way like the professional players do. So if that's the case on your forehand, you want to give yourself the intention to finish all the way. But also you want to pay attention to the fundamentals, because often what happens on the forehand is that players don't have proper rotation and they're often side on, and when they hit the forehand they don't rotate enough, and now the finish gets even more difficult. So when you keep in mind that the forehand needs to have a correct sequencing of the torso rotation, that's going to make finishing a lot more natural. But even with that, when you finish the rotation the correct way, the arm still might not go all the way. There might be some blockage in your shoulder. And again, just like the serve, You don't go past your comfort zone. You finish as far as you can without going into the pain. Now, in my experience, the stroke with the most limitations at the recreational level is the backhand, whether it be the two-handed backhand or the one-handed backhand. This is where players have very little range of motion compared to the professionals. And this is a stroke that's very difficult to pull off and make it look like a professional stroke. And let's start off with the one-handed backhand. So what you're gonna see on tour, on the one hand, there's a finish where the hand goes above the level of the shoulder, but that's not all, guys. The racket will whip backwards with the cap of the racket pointing forward, and some players are so flexible that they can touch their hands behind their back. So what I see at the recreational level is, number one, some players are uncomfortable getting their hand above the level of the shoulder. They just simply can't, whether the shoulder is locked or wherever it might be, they just simply can't go this high. And the most recreational players cannot go back very far. So I'll show you from this angle, they won't be able to get past this point. So I could tell them a million times to try to finish like Shapovalov and go as far back as they can. They just simply can't get past this point because there's a very limited amount of range of motion in their back muscles. In addition to that, a lot of players will actually feel pain in their shoulder when they try to finish too far back. So this would actually be a dangerous thing to copy. They start feeling it right away in the rotator cuff back here, and they feel pain. So guys, as much as you want to hit a backhand like Federer, maybe you just cannot because of these limitations that you have. So what are you supposed to do instead? You go as far as you can without going into the pain. Let me show you. This might be an adequate backhand for you if you have limitations. So you still want to have a circular swim path, no doubt about it, but you stop right here. And if that's not too uncomfortable, you can do the old school finish where the tip of the racket is pointing towards the outside on your finish like this. It's a very easy backhand to pull off. Yes, you might not be able to get the heavy topspin like you see on tour, but this is the cards that you're dealt with. And guys, surprisingly, the shot that gives a lot of recreational players a difficult time is the two-handed backhand. A lot of people would think because juniors have a far easier time learning the two-hander over the one-hander, it would be the same at the adult level. It is not true. The vast majority of recreational adult players who started playing tennis later in life have a very difficult time with the two-hander. In fact, most of them have an easier time doing a one-handed backhand over a two-handed backhand. And guys, the reason why the two-handed backhand is such a tough shot to pull off at the rec level is that it requires torso rotation, and also we're going to be hitting it with two hands. That in itself makes this shot tricky because, let's face it, a lot of guys at the recreational level are a little bit overweight. Now, if you have extra weight on you, if you have a big gut in front of you and you try to play the ball like this, it's going to feel really uncomfortable, really restrictive. It's going to be much easier and more comfortable to play a one-handed backhand. But even if you're a ripped guy, a marathon runner with a six-pack, still the two-handed backhand is going to be tricky to pull off because a lot of players at the recreational level will not be comfortable playing the ball with two hands and rotating at the same time. Now what I find is actually that golfers will have a little bit easier time because I've said this many times in my videos, the golf drive and the two-handed backhands are very similar. So on the golf drive, you're going to have this rotation that goes like this. The entire body is involved, and that's exactly what you want to do on a two-handed backhand as well. You want to involve the whole body, and a lot of players are uncomfortable with using the body. They want to play the ball with their hands, and now it's a shot that's very limited in the amount of range of motion that you can produce. It is far easier to do a one-handed backhand where you can basically hit it without any torso rotation. It's perfectly okay to hit a backhand by just staying sideways and having the arm go around the body. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's even some elite level players who hit the one-handed backhand like that. So for that reason, the two-handed backhand, because it's more complex, it does require torso rotation. It does require you to be a little bit tighter to the body. It is the far more limiting shot at the recreational level, and that is exactly why you see the one-handed backhand far more. So guys, as hard as this is going to sound, forget the dream you have of looking like a professional player. You're not going to look like a professional player. I've never seen it. I've been doing this my whole life. It is going to be impossible. But what I want you to focus on is getting better in the game of tennis. Apply all the fundamentals that are so necessary to improve at this game. You take all the fundamentals that all the high-level players have in common, you apply them to your game, and you are guaranteed to get better if you get the reps in. How it's gonna look, it doesn't matter. When it comes to limitations that you have, you gotta remember one thing: you don't ever go into the pain, and you try to execute your shots with comfort. As soon as you feel something, that means you have hit your limitations that you have, and these are the cards that you've been dealt with. And if you're waiting for me to give you specific exercises on how to increase your range of motion or how to get rid of some of the limitations that you do have, you're looking in the wrong place. This is outside of my area of expertise. I can tell you how to warm up perfectly for tennis. I can tell you how to treat your body after tennis to get ready for the next practice or the next match. I can tell you what the best diet is for tennis players. I cover this in great depth on intuitivetennis.com in my 2-month tennis body transformation. But the students that I see on the court sometimes have such severe limitations. They have had accidents, they have surgeries, and I cannot help these players. This is outside of my area of expertise. And I always tell them to go see their physical therapist, go see their doctors, because these people are experts in increasing range of motion, in getting rid of limitations that a lot of players have, and they're gonna give you the right advice. So guys, do not ask me about medical things. I don't have to tell you that I'm not a doctor. You know that. I'm a tennis coach, I'm a tennis player. For medical questions such as the things that are discussed in today's video, such as not being able to hit a one-handed backhand properly because your shoulder is locked, there's nothing I can help you with. This is why I say it's the cards that you've been dealt with. Are there ways to improve the range of motion of the shoulder? Of course there are. But again, don't ask me about medical things. Go see your doctor. Go see your physical therapist. They're going to be able to help you a lot more than I can.